שלום, מה שלומכם? אנחנו שמחים לארח אתכם כאן בפסטיבל הסרטים הבינלאומי ה-36 של חיפה, ואיתנו נמצא אורח, הבמאי אחמן טבוסי, הוא הבמאי של הסרט שמות הפרחים. לי קוראים ירון שמיר, אני מנהל שותף של פסטיבל הסרטים, ומעכשיו אני אעבור לדבר באנגלית כדי שגם אחמן יבין אותנו ונוכל לשוחח קצת על הסרט. So, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, Yaron. It's great to be there. Virtually with the audience, and I'm very glad that they're about to or have already watched the film. I'm not sure when this will be exactly, this conversation shown to them. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be in Haifa Film Festival. I was really, as I was telling you, looking forward to being there in Haifa and meet the audience in person. Well, because of the pandemic, we have to be creative and find different ways to show the film, such as showing the film virtually. But I hope really to meet you and be in the festival in future years.
Okay, thank you. So I will say a few words about yourself and about the film, and then we'll start just chatting about it.
Sure.
So the film, The Name of the Flowers, is presented in the festival in the Carmel competition section, which is the international section of the festival. The film was presented in various film festivals and won in Tallinn a special prize from the jury. Bahman Tavosi is an Iranian who lives now in Canada, was born in Iran, and I think maybe later we will talk about your first two creations that are Iranian in all ways.
Sure.
And this is your third film, right? The Name of the Flowers.
Feature film-wise, it's my
First.
Second.
Second, okay.
The first one was a documentary. Some countries it considered to be a mid-length, some other full length and so on. But this is the first feature fiction film.
Okay. So maybe I will start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your biography.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I was born in Iran. In Haifa Film Festival, I insist to be introduced as an Iranian filmmaker instead of Iranian Canadian, because that's for me is an important message, rather, I have to say, for an Iranian filmmaker or an Iranian voice to be there, and to create this bridge, this friendship, this cultural exchange. This is very important for me, and I'm very glad to be introduced in this case as an Iranian filmmaker. And it's a pleasure that the audience, could watch this film. I don't want to get immediately political about things, but later on, maybe maybe it would be nice to talk about other aspects as well. But anyway, so I was born in Iran, and I was a child actor for a few years. I learned cinema over there from these Iranian masters. By the way of which I was told they're very well introduced to Israeli audience, the Iranian cinema, and those international class Iranian masters, etc. And I was also a film critic in Iran for a few years. I started very young. I was 16, 17 years old. And then again, as a teenager, I left Iran very early to Canada. I lived in Canada for I believe some 10, 15 years. And from there, I went to South America. I lived in South America for a while. And then this film, the first feature fiction film, is a co-production of a few these countries and these cultures that have been introduced to Canada, United States, even Qatar as our post-production, financier, and then Bolivia itself. I guess that would be a little small biography, right?
It is, I think it is this I want to ask you exactly about this. You're an Iranian born and raised,
okay,
and then became a Canadian, and you decided to make a film, which is, we'll talk about it more extensively yet later, which is Iranian, for me, it was Iranian in heart and soul, but it takes place in Bolivia. And a very important figure in this film, although it's not a human figure, but it's a memory, is Che Guevara. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can elaborate about this a little bit.
Sure. No, it is connected, Yaron, at the end of the day. I find, as an individual, I find the connections there. I mean, I approached Che Guevara there in South America as a highly ideological figure, who he is. He's still an ideological figure. And being born in Iran, in that Islamic, state, with Islamic Republic of Iran and so on, you're introduced to a very loaded and heavy political ideology from the beginning. No, and then I mentioned this a couple of days earlier. I was born in the end of this century, 20th century, where all these great and grand narratives of our time were coming to an end. Soviet regime, and then all those stories of two world wars. The Second World War I heard from my grandfather. I was born in the middle of an 8 years war with Iraq. I mean, it was literally in the middle of the war. And then I was born in a post-revolution Iran and so on. So being born in that place and in that time, it creates its own questions and its own, problematics for you as a young person. And so, I grew up with these questions of ideology and ideological figures and, even political mythology and so on. When I went to Bolivia for the first time, and that's the Bolivia of Evo Morales, highly left, ideological, Bolivia of the time, who was praising the figure of Che Guevara and so on. I found that Bolivia in some ways very similar to the condition where I was born and where I grew up, and then
because every fundamentalist regime or theory or ideology in basic are the same. I mean, what they want to do to you.
Exactly, and ideology has. I mentioned this also earlier, a few days earlier to a friend. Ideology has its own way of functioning. It doesn't really matter if it's in Iran or if it's in South America, etc. It has, it's a device that functions in the same way. And so all those questions and problematics, etc., that I was involved with in Iran, I tried to project them onto a South American country in a way. Now, this is a very simplistic explanation to a process of creation of art. It cannot be as simple, but to answer your questions, perhaps this explanation could be partially useful, I hope.
Okay, so maybe you could share with us, because when I watched the film, I really, well, the film is taking place in Bolivia and it speaks Spanish, of course, but as I said before, I felt that I watched an Iranian film. And I remembered some of the big masters of Iranian cinema like Kiarostami and Makhmalbaf, and maybe you could refer to your influences, your heroes of Iranian cinema.
I mean, Kiarostami, from that generation of filmmakers, in particular, I've been a fan of Kiarostami more than Makhmalbaf.
Okay.
There are a couple of his films that I like, but Kiarostami is totally a different case for me. I have a lot of respect for Makhmalbaf as well. And then when I was developing this film, I wasn't conscious about that much of a, similarity, so to speak, with Kiarostami cinema. But eventually, I guess, in terms of the choice of the environment, the choice of the character and so on, creates its own similarities. I remember a couple of audience saw a road scene where a car, rides in a road, and then that for them was reminiscent of Kiarostami. In particular, I made that scene as a homage to Kiarostami himself, that little road scene, that the car scene, etc.
Okay, for what? For Taste of Cherries, or?
We use that. I mean, it's an iconic kind of.
Okay.
Basically, part of his cinema, which the cars driving in these zigzag roads, in these the landscapes and all that. But in general, when I was involved with the architecture of the film, so to speak, or the visual architecture of the film, I didn't have any specific person in mind. You know, I was trying to just respect the environment that I was in. Bolivia is a very different country. We were shooting in you know, Los Andes, which is the you know, the highlands, no?
Mm-hmm.
Bolivian highlands. It had its own visual texture. It's something that I had to learn for many years. I had to study very hard. I had to travel a lot and just adapt myself to a total new kind of environment and condition.
Mm-hmm.
So I, as much as I want to have this little homage to, you know, to Kiarostami, etc., at the end of the day, you have to stick to your own context and make your own film. But I'm glad that the film was at some points reminiscent of Kiarostami and had, as you mentioned, had that the spirit of Iranian cinema. That's for my first feature fiction film. You know, it's something pleasant to have, you know,
well, you are part of, I think you are part of a big tradition, a wonderful tradition.
Of a tradition of Iranian cinema.
Iranian cinema and filmmakers, yes.
Okay, exactly. I'm happy that the film reflected, you know, my earlier engagement and so on with Iranian cinema.
I thought that another forte of Iranian cinema while watching your film, it's also presented in your film, is to tell stories about what we call the simple man, the little man, in this case, woman, of course, when it has to battle, when it has a very strong belief in something, a very strong sense of direction, let's say, and then it battles with big forces, much bigger forces, but in this stubbornness, yes, finally it gets maybe itself or even you as a viewer to the point it wants to get. And for that reason, there is something that again is something that I recognize, and it's used beautifully in the film, is the idea of repetitivity.
Repetition.
You're doing it again and again and again and again until something gives up or gives in.
Well, that's what that character is all about, no? I mean, I was interested how mythology, you know, the concept of mythology is constructed upon these constant repetitive storytelling, you know, of these individuals. For instance, when I went for the first time to the village where Che Guevara was killed, which is La Higuera, you know, that was my first impression that this man, or his legacy, let's say, so to speak, or his mythology, whatever, didn't really exist or wouldn't exist without the act of storytelling of these old villagers that I meet every day, you know. And so the idea was taken from there, that constant repetition, you know, upon which, you know, the concept of history and mythology and legacies are built upon. And that's how the idea of repetition came from in the film. And naturally it manifested itself in the visual world as well, because visually you repeat certain elements as well in the film, if you remember. That was a decision my editor and I, Lucas Viegas, our editor in Montreal, and I, we made, you know, when we were editing the film.
So can you tell us a little bit about when you watch the film, the contrast between the woman, her being one and in many ways alone, and she's confronting not only the villages and the authorities, but also nature, because nature is big, is not very hostile. I mean, the weather is problematic. The conditions are harsh. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about filming this film in these conditions, in these places.
Well, it was something. It was filming in extreme conditions, Yaron, because first of all, we were shooting in a place with high altitude, I believe, about 5,000 feet above the sea.
Wow. You weren't sick at the beginning?
I mean, for the first few weeks, you feel sick, and then you keep returning. You use other local, remedies, which is like coca leaves that people chew over there, the coca teas. I'm not sure if you've been to South America.
I know, because I touched Bolivia. I did a very extensive traveling in Chile. Okay. And I was in Lauca National Park, which is on the border with Chile, with Peru and Bolivia. And I slept in a cabin, and I was given by the cabin caretaker tea with coca leaves to ease the altitude problems.
That helps.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you use all that you can to make the space a little bit friendlier to yourself, but at the end of the day, 100% of the filming was done in exterior. We didn't have that much interior spaces. The wind, the snow, and then Bolivia, something that, you notice first is just constant change of weather that makes continuity a pain, I mean, this very moment that we are talking might be, cloudy, and then, next hour might be sun and the snow, and the, later during the day. So continuity was a big problem. And then, we also shot the film in 2 different years. Part of the shooting schedule was 2017. We had to stop the shooting, return again 2018. And it was extreme, if I can use that term. I mean, I remember one of our actors, the first time he came to the set, because of the blood pressure problem that he had, which got worse due to the altitude, we had to run to hospital immediately, and the shooting was canceled, and so on and so on. That's therefore, it makes me also as director to appreciate the work, the collaboration, all these great people that have been with my director of photography, Nicolas Taburgo, my Bolivian producer, Andrea Gutierrez, our costume designer, Luz Flores, Rodrigo Alvarez, and the sound, and everyone who was involved with all that craziness.
Process.
Process.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you became to choose the leading actress for the film, because her face is so dominant. I mean, she's like nature there.
She's like nature there, no? Exactly. I like that description. She is a force of nature there. As you noticed, the whole casting over there is non-actors.
Okay.
Actores naturales, as they say in Spanish, or non-actors. We don't have professional actors, except 1 or 2 there. So when you go with casting non-actors for a film, it requires its own process. Your auditioning is different, your rehearsal is different, your everything is different, You can't just hand in a dialogue page or a script to non-actors and ask them to read or act this way and the other way. It entirely requires a different methodology. I also learned a lot. I just remembered a couple of years earlier, I learned a lot from methodologies of Iskandar Kopti. Iskandar Kopti, Israeli-Palestinian filmmaker, and that tremendous film, Ajami. That was a masterclass for me back then when I was younger. I learned a lot of methodologies of Iskandar from that film, and also from Iranian cinema. Anyway, so this actress was also, subject to the same process of casting. We had a big casting department that were looking for the non-actors, and they found this lady in a market. She was selling vegetables and local products. I met her. We made friends immediately, and I made friends with any other cast as well, because you need that level of intimacy.
How old is she?
She's not actually as old as she looks in the picture. She should be about 7 years old, but she looks. The picture she looks kind of older, I have to say.
Yeah, she looks like 80 at least in the film. And how did she connect to the story itself?
As I mentioned, Yaron, the non-actors, they don't get to know much about anything. you know, I mean, they just function based on daily needs of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the times, without having the knowing the story from point A to point Z. Am I connected? I heard that.
Yeah. Now, we are okay now. But did she? I mean, I guess you told her something about the general idea of of Che Guevara and her role in the film. So, I mean, she's a Che Guevara fan. She knows about the mythology of the man, or
You're going to be surprised if I tell you she didn't know who Che Guevara was.
Well, actually, I'm not surprised because I know these things also from Israel, something that it is really, sometimes some people that are very famous around the world and they are considered mythology. There are some people who are not connected to it and never heard about these people, about this man, and then it's so strange, but yeah, I believe it. Okay.
Talking to an Egyptian friend of mine yesterday,
Uh-huh.
and she said that she's never been to pyramids, she's never seen pyramids, and
Exactly.
I'm a foreigner, I've seen pyramids many times, so that's or let's say this Iranian, touristic site of Persepolis, whatever, etc. Many locals still haven't seen anything, but foreigners come and take pictures and so on. Yeah, that's as you mentioned, that's a very common story, right?
Okay. So you're already working on your next project?
I'm investigating, and not surprisingly, because not to me, because I've been introduced to Jewish culture, if you may, for many years, and I've been a fan of many different aspects of it. But anyways, I mean, what I was trying to say that it might have something also with the Jewish culture.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Next project. I'm not in the stage to talk about it much because I'm still investigating. Mm-hmm. But yes, I'm working on the next film, on development and the script writing and so
on. Okay. So there is something else that you want to tell us, or can we conclude?
Absolutely. No, what I want to say is that, so here I'm going to go a little political, if it's okay with you guys. Mm-hmm. But so you see, the idea of an Iranian filmmaker being presenting a film in Haifa and so on, it kind of creates, so to speak, certain controversies, because as I mentioned, that bridge hasn't been built concretely yet between us. That's why I appreciated Mahmalbaf so very much when he came, and I think he went to, where was he? He went to the other festival.
He's been with us, exactly. And he also we had an Iranian female director, Safida Farsi.
Safida Farsi is from Canadian, right?
Also? No, she's French now.
Oh, French.
Yeah. She's also, I mean, an Iranian that lives now in France, and you have to remember that. I guess you do remember. You do know that. Well, this bridge was there until the Iranian Revolution. I mean, there were extensive connections between the two people.
Right. So, no, that's the point that I want to make, and I encourage all other filmmakers, be it from the Arab world, be it from Iran, to make such decision, because this is the time where, more than any other time, we need this bridge. We need the dialogue, and we need this cultural bridge, And I felt responsible to be, a small part of this whole bridge, and I hope that it expands and it becomes more and more, and it is stronger. It's very important. Just today morning, I hope I'm not going too off topic. You let me know if I'm too far from the topic. But just today morning, I was mentioning to a friend of mine the case of Iranian athletes, let's say, that prepare very hard for Olympics and so on, and just by what they're dictated by the Iranian regime, they have to reject a competition against an Israeli athlete, and so these are really these are very sad news,
Yeah, they are.
I encourage my friends, my athletes friends, my friends in culture and cinema and all that. I encourage all of them not to join such agenda, because it will lead us nowhere. Dialogue most important. And I'm very glad to be a small part of that. Hopefully next time physically in Haifa.
Thank you very much for these warm and kind words, and I sign or I support every one and each of them. Thank you for saying them. Thank you for your wonderful film. And we are proud to present it in Haifa and in competition, and we're looking forward to your next film. And hopefully being physically in Haifa to present it. And that's it. So good morning.
Thank you very much. Have a great day in Haifa.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.